Well, I'll tell you folks what. I am someone who likes to call balls and strikes. I called out Joe yesterday when he massacred innocent women and children and called them ISIS, which apparently does not appear to be the case, because the White House or the Pentagon is still refusing to name specifically, which members of ISIS it was that they were targeting and who they took out. And for that crime, that war crime, I do think that Joe Biden should be tried at The Hague and probably spend the rest of his life, what little time he has left, maybe a couple years or so, in a prison. But today is a new day. Joe Biden has made a new speech, and I have to say he got through it pretty well. Obviously, using teleprompter, but still, he was able to hold himself together pretty well, and it was quite a few minutes. He didn't take any questions, mind you. That would have been a disaster. But he just came out, he said his piece, and he walked away. And the substance of what he said was pretty darn good. And he finally, something I've been waiting for a long time, something that I initially said when this whole airlift started, pulling people out of Afghanistan, the whole disaster that ensued of people at the airport just, wandering around and banging down the gates saying, please let me in, people handing their children over the fences, which I think was probably a misleading story. I don't think that people were literally handing off their children to never see them again. I believe that child was just dehydrated, and they were trying to hand off their child, the baby, to get medical attention, and then later on the parents were reunited, but again, that's beside the point here. All of this chaos that we've seen at the Kabul airport over the last week, I was apoplectic at the start of this because I did not understand why these Americans and these Afghan people who wanted to get out hadn't gotten out a long time ago, because everyone has known since I think it was February of 2020 the deal was done with the Taliban. It was sealed. The U.S. was going to be out by May 1st. Biden extended that months and months later past the original deadline. Everyone should have been out by May 1st, let alone by August. I mean, anyone after May 1st is on borrowed time. The deal was in effect. By that point, the Taliban was supposed to be fully in control of the country. And so even with the U.S. military staying a couple months extra and buying these people some extra time, it was still a huge bottleneck as everyone rushed for the exits at the same time. And so to me, what made sense was that, well, maybe these people were duped by the administration. And the administration tried to convince everyone that the Kabul government, the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan, which the U.S. had been propping up for 2 decades, well, not quite 2 decades, but pretty close, it was going to stand on its own, and they had 300,000 troops that were ready and able to defend, the American-backed regime, and that basically everything was going to be okay. And these folks at the end realized, oh gee, oh God, this is bad, we got to get out right now. But, I don't know, maybe this is Joe trying to go backwards and say, hey, no, I didn't mislead these people, I gave them fair warning. He's claiming that the U.S. State Department reached out to all the Americans in Afghanistan 19 times, going back all the way to March of this year. And if that is the case, well, it's hard for me to really give him a lot of crap over this. If these people were warned 19 times, going all the way back to March, it's really on them if they chose to stay in Afghanistan this long. I mean, the U.S., I don't think, could or should have forced them to leave. The U.S. shouldn't have gone around rounding people up against their will. These people should have been given fair warning. Hey, this is all over. Come August, or come August, or come when the U.S. leaves. As soon as U.S. troops are gone, it's over in this country, and you need to get out. If people fail to heed that warning, it's on them. But I highly doubt that the U.S. government was that transparent about the situation. I doubt that they were that blunt about it, because everything that we were hearing in the media and out of the so-called intelligence community was that the Afghan government was going to hang on. And so I think that Biden is trying to cover his rear end here. a little bit by saying, hey, we warned these folks 19 times. It might be true that they did give them 19 notifications that the U.S. was going to leave and that they have an opportunity now to get out. But he's probably not telling us how rosy of an image or how not blunt the government was being with people at that point. I think that the U.S. probably could have done a whole hell of a lot more to alert their citizens that this was going to break down very quickly. I think that the propaganda about the strength of the Afghan government that the U.S. had supposedly built up over the last 20 years was so strong that it caused a lot of people to put themselves in what ended up being an extremely dangerous, life-threatening, and potentially deadly situation. It would seem that there were a lot of people who intended to stay in Afghanistan after the U.S. left because they believed that the Afghan government would survive. And once they realized that that was a fantasy, once it all came apart, they realized, oh, gee, we really do have to get out of here. And so at this point, I think that that is probably the key issue in which the U.S. under Joe Biden screwed up. Now, it's hard for me to say whether that would have been any different under Trump. I don't think that Trump would have been leaving saying, hey, yeah, the Taliban are going to come in and the Kabul government's going to totally be wiped out and all of you Americans need to get out now. I think that Trump would have probably tried to have been rosy too. It's hard to imagine any U.S. president trash-talking their own puppet regime and saying how basically, yeah, we've been there for 20 years and, you know, this isn't going to make it a month. They're not going to make it a few weeks after we leave. So I think we're going to learn a lot more about this in the coming years. We're going to learn the truth about the specifics of what could have been done better, how perhaps once these folks realized that they really needed to get out of the country, how the U.S. could have done more to help them. But this all could have been avoided had people really known the truth, had it been obvious, had the U.S. been blunt and said to all these folks, hey, you know, you get out now or else we're not going to be able to save you later. I don't know the nature of the communications that were sent out by the U.S. government to, that Biden's referring to, these 19 times that they tried to contact people. If they really said, hey, you know, you have until this date. If you want U.S. protection, you need to get out by this date or else you're on your own. If they said that, then, you know, hey, it's on these folks. But until I see that, it's hard for me to assume that you had thousands of people who were willing to say, you know what, okay, I'll fend for myself. And the other thing that Biden said that I can't confirm, because we just don't have enough facts about this stuff either way, is that he's saying the Americans that are still left in Afghanistan largely are Afghan dual citizens, people who were born in Afghanistan and at some point became naturalized U.S. citizens who, after the U.S. invaded Afghanistan or took over, decided, hey, you know what, Afghanistan seems like it's on the up and up. I'm going to go back to my home country and try and rebuild that. And so Joe is saying that there's a lot of these folks who are technically U.S. citizens who chose to stay there. I don't know if that's the case. I mean, it kind of makes sense, but again, it's hard for me to believe. We keep getting, you know, a bunch of independent, you know, not really confirmable reports of individual Americans who have been trying to get out and simply can't. And again, were these people who were warned by the federal government, hey, you got to get out or else you're going to be stuck there? I don't know, but this is a new defense. This is the kind of thing that I would have expected Biden to have said initially back when all this started. You know, if this was the case, I would have, if I were in Biden's position and there was this chaos at the airport, the first thing I would have come out and said it was, hey, everyone knew that we were leaving. These people were warned for months, 19 times going all the way back until May. We said to them, hey, you need to get out now. You need to get out now. You need to get out now, or else we're not going to be able to protect you. And so if this is the case, why is Biden only coming out and saying this now? I'm perhaps more torn on this whole story now than I have been at any other point after his press conference today. You know, I've gone back and forth between thinking, hey, you know, maybe this is going pretty well, or maybe he's doing a pretty terrible job and this could have been a lot better. You know, there is that alternative theory that, hey, maybe the U.S. is just trying to bungle the withdrawal, you know, so badly that people think, gee, we'll never want to end another war again. But if it's really true that all these people chose to stay there, and they put themselves at risk, is this really so bad considering those circumstances? I don't know. We don't have a time machine. We can't go back in time and, install Donald Trump and see how different things would have been if he were in charge. I definitely think that, Donald Trump's personality probably would work better with the Taliban, because Trump has, much more of a third world tough guy kind of attitude. I think that, perhaps they might have been a little more helpful in getting people out. But I mean, again, it's impossible for me to say that. It's all conjecture. When people keep slamming Biden for bringing up his son Beau and to say, hey, you know what, I know how these families feel who have lost loved ones. My son died as a result of the war. And people, I don't think, really understand, because people go, oh, Beau died of cancer. He didn't die from the war. Beau Biden got cancer at a burn pit in, what was that city in Kurdistan, in Iraq? Mosul, I think it was. But Beau Biden, he's a U.S. senator's son. They weren't putting him on the front lines, I don't think. He wasn't doing anything that was considered super dangerous, but I guess he was working in the burn pits. And the burn pits were burning toxic chemicals, and that gave him cancer, and it killed him. And so he absolutely should be considered a war casualty. Joe Biden did lose his son to the wars, and I think that made an impact on him. I believe he said as much in interviews before, that, hey, I basically killed my son. My actions directly, I directly contributed to the start of the Iraq War, and that war killed my son. And today he brought up, to those people who were saying, oh, this was a low-cost war, no American had died there in 18 months. He brought up a statistic. I didn't fact-check it, but let's just take it at face value. I know that it's a big number. 18 veterans die every day from suicide. Those should be considered war casualties. I absolutely agree with that. The costs of war are not just, from the guys who are killed in action. And so no matter how bad this withdrawal might have gone or been executed, it is important to remember that it is far better having gone through with this withdrawal, no matter how painful it might have been, than it would have been to continue the war for even another month or another year. Because the realities of this war are that you have a ton of American veterans, even if they don't get killed over there, they kill themselves when they get back home. You have Afghan women and children and innocent men being slaughtered left and right, just like we saw on Sunday with the drone strike. That happened all the time in Afghanistan. And so I think that there is a lot of good in what Biden said today. I think that maybe in his old age, after being, serving as a tool for the war state, for, all of his life pretty much, maybe there's a softening within him, and he's thinking to himself, you know what, maybe this is my chance to try and right some of these wrongs. Now, with that said, I have to point out, I do think that Biden is going to pivot to a tough guy stance. I almost completely forgot about this, because the whole tone of his speech, he was talking about, hey, Afghanistan is a thing of the past. That's yesterday's war. We're moving on from that. Terrorism is much more dynamic. It's not just all about the Taliban. You can't focus on them. And he brought up Al-Shabaab specifically, which is ridiculous. Al-Shabaab is not going to be blowing up the Twin Towers tomorrow. Al-Shabaab is an essentially an anti-U.S. occupation group. He brought up Al-Qaeda in Syria and Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, which is very strange because those two groups are closely aligned with the U.S., in terms of foreign policy. So it's strange because the U.S. backed Al-Qaeda in Syria against Assad, and they're backing Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula against the Houthis. And so what I got from this is that Biden realizes that he looks weak now, and he needs to prove that he's a tough guy. So he's going to say, hey, I'm going to end this war in Afghanistan. We're going to stop fighting bad guys there, but then we're going to go and have lots of wars in other countries to prove just how much I'm committed to the war on terror. And this could be a disaster. I hope that the blowback against the negative response that Biden got from ending this war doesn't lead to him starting any new wars. Now, something else that he said was that he seemed to have a problem with the idea of boots on the ground. It was very Obama-esque in the way that he was speaking. It seemed like, what he wants to do is just intensify the drone war. And he kind of wants to pull an Obama 2.0. Kind of Obama's foreign policy minus the war in Afghanistan. Just bomb people all over the world, and say, hey, look at all these terrorists we're killing. Terrorists, quote unquote. And by terrorists, they usually mean innocent civilians. Family out for a picnic on a sunny day. Boom, dead. So that's my number one fear moving forward after all this. I'm worried that Biden is going to try and really, make himself into a tough guy and try and rack up a big body count. I think that's exactly what Sunday was about. They didn't have anyone that they knew of from ISIS-K to go and blow up, but he said on Thursday, oh, we'll never forgive, we'll never forget, so we got to blow up some ISIS-K. And so they just blew up a random house and killed 10 innocent people, probably. And so we're going to, I forecast we're going to see a lot more of that moving forward. So with that said, I will see you folks back here tomorrow.